Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking on a work that's so much more than a novel. It's really a cultural flashpoint. Sylvia Plath's masterpiece, The Bell Jar.
It really is. It's almost impossible to talk about this book just as a piece of fiction, or even just as a story about mental illness.
Right.
From the moment it was published, it became this pivotal phenomenon, but it gained that fame through a tragedy that Plath herself, had desperately tried to prevent.
And its path to even getting published it was a battle, full of rejection, skepticism, and just a ton of controversy.
Absolutely. The sources we've looked at make it clear. Plath saw this book as a necessary step, something she had to write to exercise her past.
But that's the irony, isn't it? The very thing that made it necessary for her, the autobiographical content, was what created all the obstacles.
Exactly. So our mission for you today is to really conduct a kind of forensic analysis. We want to pull out the core experience of the main character, Esther Greenwood, and look at her incredibly sharp and often very funny critique of 1950s America. But we absolutely have to examine that deep connection between the fiction and Plath's own life. The intense Romana Clef elements that she tried so hard to suppress.
Okay, before we go any further, let's define that term. I think a lot of people have heard it, but might not know exactly what it means. When we say Romana Clef, what are we talking about here?
Right, so Romana Clef is French, and it literally means novel with a key.
A key.
Yeah. It's a novel where real people and real events are just barely disguised. They're presented as fiction, but anyone who was, in the know or close to the author would immediately recognize who and what she was writing about.
And with Plath, it wasn't even that thinly veiled, was it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Esther Greenwood's guest editorship in New York, her boyfriend Buddy Willard, and especially her time in the mental asylum. All of it was drawn directly from her own life, sometimes with almost no changes.
Which is why she was so terrified to publish it in America. The sources say she insisted it shouldn't be published here because it would be hurtful to her family and their friends.
Precisely. Her mother, Aurelia, was extremely protective of the family's image. And the way Plath portrayed certain people, like her boyfriend, and even her own mother, was just so raw and unflattering.
She knew they'd be recognized.
Of course. American readers would recognize the characters, the colleges, the magazines, everything. And that was a public and a personal reckoning she just wasn't ready for.
So to really understand Esther's story, we have to set the stage. The novel opens with this very specific, ominous line about a queer, sultry summer that was dominated by the news of the Rosenberg's electrocution.
That framing is so deliberate. It immediately sets this tone of national anxiety, of moral confusion. You have to remember the year is 1953.
Right, so Eisenhower's just starting his presidency.
The McCarthy witch hunts are in full swing, and the execution of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg for espionage was just dominating the headlines. It symbolized this deep, deep political paranoia and the terrifying power of the state.
And Esther's reaction to it is so telling. She's not focused on the politics of it all.
No, not at all.
She's obsessed with the physical horror of it, wondering what it felt like being burned alive all along your nerves.
And that is such a classic Plath move. She takes this huge public political event and immediately internalizes it as a physical threat. The national dissonance perfectly mirrors her own psychological dissonance.
So she's living this supposed dream in New York, all glamour and opportunity.
While on the inside, she's feeling this profound numbness that feels to her like being tortured or already dead.
Which brings us right to the novel's modern relevance, which is, well, it's pretty tragic. This book was written before recreational drugs were common, before the pill, before women's studies was even a thing.
And yet it speaks so directly to people today. It's heartbreakingly current when you look at the statistics. The suicide rate for adolescents in America has quadrupled since World War II.
Quadrupled.
And clinical depression has become almost an epidemic, especially among young, high-achieving women, the exact demographic that first championed this book.
Because it maps that struggle, doesn't it? The struggle to define yourself when society has all these rigid boxes for you.
It really does. How do you sort out your life? How do you deal with men, with sex, with finding your own truth when the world wants you to conform?
It gives a name to that feeling of being overwhelmed, that image of the bell jar descending.
It's become cultural shorthand. Countless people have used that exact phrase to describe what severe depression feels like, that suffocating isolation. The fact that its themes are still so potent just proves how powerful and necessary it was.
Okay, so let's unpack this dual life the novel had. On one hand, it's a work of fierce literary ambition, and on the other, it's a document Plath desperately wanted to hide.
Her ambitions were huge. We canonize her as a poet, and her first book of poetry, The Colossus, came out in 1962. But she saw herself conquering every form. She explicitly said she planned to write novel after novel.
And she wasn't just interested in high art literary circles. The sources mentioned she wanted to break into the slicks.
Yeah, magazines like Ladies' Home Journal.
Hmm.
That shows you she wanted broad popular success and, the income that comes with it. She wasn't an artist who looked down on commercial success.
But the novel itself was almost a side project at first.
It was, and there's a real layer of irony in how it was funded, which brings us to the Eugene F. Saxton Fellowship.
A fellowship that had already rejected her once before.
It had. She first applied with her poetry manuscript for The Colossus, and they turned her down flat. The trustees felt she'd already had valuable awards dropped into her lap, and get this, suggested maybe she should continue teaching.
Wow, that's a burn.
A deep one. It was a real blow to her professional ego, but then she applied again.
This time with the novel.
Right, she had about a sixth of it written. She framed the application around needing money for a babysitter and a study space so she could write away from the tiny flat she shared with Ted Hughes and their baby. And this time, they approved it.
So the very institution that rejected her poetry ended up funding her prose.
The ultimate irony. But even with that money, once the manuscript was done, it hit a brick wall in America. The rejection came from inside her own publisher, Harper & Row, before she'd even officially submitted it. The initial readers' reports were just damning. Two older women, both with an interest in poetry, read it in late 1962, and their verdict was that it was disappointing, juvenile, and overwrought.
Ouch. Juvenile and overwrought. They just didn't get it.
They completely missed the point. They were expecting more of her formal literary poetry and this raw confessional prose. It felt too personal, maybe too hysterical for their taste. It just sank its chances for a U.S. publication right there.
So that leads to its first kind of stealthy publication in the UK.
Yes, William Heinemann Limited published it in January of 1963 under the pseudonym Victoria Lucas.
And the timing here is it's crucial.
It's everything. Because Plath died by suicide in February 1963, just a few weeks after it came out.
And the initial reviews weren't even that great, were they?
They were lukewarm at best. And the sources say she was deeply stung by that. She was so hungry for that validation.
But even if they were lukewarm, they couldn't deny the quality of the writing itself.
No, they couldn't. Even the critics who were unsure about it, like one guy writing for The Listener, had to admit, she can certainly write. They just didn't know what she had written. Was it a novel? Was it therapy? The critical world at the time really struggled to categorize it.
And then the tragedy of her death changes everything.
Instantly, it transforms this modestly received novel into a major event in England, but the fight to get it published in the U.S. was still going on.
Even with the internal opposition at Harper still pushing back.
The original reader who hated it was still there, arguing against publishing it posthumously. But then, this brilliant sales manager at Harper, Frank Siosia, got his hands on it.
He saw the potential.
He more than saw it. He loved the book, and more importantly, he predicted extraordinary sales. He really went to bat for it and convinced the company to buy the U.S. rights.
And he was right.
In a massive way. The U.S. paperback came out in 1972, and it sold over 3 million copies since then. It cemented her legacy not just as a poet, but as a major American novelist.
It creates such a troubling dynamic, doesn't it? Plath, the artist, wanted praise and success.
But the book's greatest success came because of the very personal tragedy she tried to hide with the pseudonym. The fame became inseparable from her death.
It's the ultimate literary irony. The book she wrote to free herself from her past
Became the defining narrative of her life, precisely because she didn't live long enough to write that second book, seen through the eyes of health, that she talked about. The tragedy guaranteed its success, but for a long time, it also obscured the literary achievement.
Okay, let's shift into the novel itself. It starts with Esther Greenwood in what should be a dream come true, but it sours so quickly.
It really does. She's in New York City. She's won this guest editorship at a major fashion magazine, which was based on Plath's own summer at Mademoiselle. For a college girl in the 50s, this was the absolute peak.
All expenses paid, free gifts, parties.
Everything. Ballet tickets, fashion passes, the works. And, crucially, she's staying at the Amazon Hotel.
Which is an important detail for understanding the time.
A huge detail. The Amazon was a stand-in for the Barbizon Hotel for Women, which was a real place. It was designed to house these respectable young women secretaries, models, students, and shield them from the big bad city.
And by big bad city, they mostly met men.
They mostly meant men. It was this strange convent of purity. You have all the freedom of New York by day, but you're under maximum supervision at night. A total contradiction.
So Esther is supposed to be the envy of thousands, living this dream. But right away, her internal monologue just rejects that whole premise.
She feels completely numb. She says she isn't steering anything. She's being shoved around like a numb trolley bus. From the hotel to the office to parties, it's all just happening to her.
And that image she uses is so powerful.
The eye of a tornado. She feels like she's the empty, quiet center, just moving dully along in the middle of the surrounding hullabaloo. All that external glamour just makes her feel even more dead inside.
And that disconnect is really personified by the two girls she meets, Doreen and Betsy. They're like two different paths she could take.
Absolutely. They represent the two available archetypes for women at the time. Doreen is the cynical, decadent one. She's witty, all dressed in white, immediately making sarcastic comments about their boss, JC.
And Esther is drawn to that at first.
She's drawn to what she calls that elaborate decadence. It feels smart, worldly, like a way to be superior to all the fashion magazine fluff.
But then you have Betsy.
Then there's Betsy, the sweet, innocent girl from the Midwest who is genuinely thrilled by everything. The freebies, the parties. She represents the ideal of the happy, wholesome American girl.
And Esther just bounces between them.
Violently. 1 minute she's with Doreen feeling wise and cynical as all hell, but that path is too isolating. Ultimately, she decides she has to be loyal to Betsy and her innocent friends because she realizes that, deep down, Betsy is who I resembled at heart.
She still craves that purity and acceptance, even as she scorns it.
Exactly. And speaking of people she scorns but also admires, we have to talk about JC, her boss.
But she's the opposite of all the fashion gushers.
Right. JC is presented as, well, unattractive. Doreen calls her ugly as sin, but she's formidable. She's smart, competent, she reads multiple languages, she knows real writers. She's the career woman Esther thinks she should want to become.
But she also represents this immense pressure. JC asks her what she wants to be and expects a 5-year plan.
And she's pushing her, have you read Finnegan's Wake? You need to learn more languages. She embodies both feminist ambition and the crushing patriarchal pressure to constantly achieve more. Esther says JC wants to teach her something, just like all the old ladies in her life.
So even female mentorship feels suffocating.
It becomes just another burden. Which leads us to the physical climax of the New York section, the crab meat poisoning. It's this moment of physical revulsion that perfectly mirrors her psychological state.
It's at the Ladies' Day banquet, which should be the height of glamour.
It should be. But Esther shows up starving and is completely strategic about the food. She's just laser focused on the caviar while the host is giving his speech.
This is after she already made that famous mistake at another lunch, right?
Oh yeah, where she eats the water and cherry blossoms out of the finger bowl, thinking it's some kind of Japanese after-dinner soup.
Which is such a perfect little moment of her just not fitting in.
It's a perfect microcosm of her social failure. She tries to play the part, but she doesn't know the rules. The banquet is just the bigger, more physically traumatic version of that.
The mass food poisoning.
Everyone gets sick from the crab meat, and Esther is watching this terrible Technicolor football movie, feeling this terrible danger of puking and hating everyone in the audience, calling them stupid moon brains.
The vomiting is literally a purge of all the poison she's ingested, both literal and metaphorical.
It is. But in this really strange twist, the shared misery is what finally connects her to Betsy, and she has that amazing insight. There is nothing like puking with somebody to make you into old friends.
So real connection doesn't come from glamour.
Yeah.
It comes from shared, ugly, painful reality.
Exactly.
So the New York dream collapses and Esther goes home. And that's when she's faced with this central, paralyzing problem. What is she supposed to do with her life?
And the burden of expectation she's carrying is just colossal. We have to remember, Esther isn't just a smart girl. She is the absolute definition of a high achiever.
The book lists her resume. It's staggering.
15 years of straight A's, college correspondent, literary magazine editor, full scholarships promised, everyone championing her for graduate school. She had won the game, and the price for winning is that you're not allowed to stop playing.
But the New York trip and that confrontation with JC, where she has to admit she has no plan, that forces the crisis out into the open.
She calls that realization a deep shock. It's like finding out the man you thought was your father was a sham your whole life. The truth was there, but it was hidden under years of constant achievement.
And JC's advice is just more pressure. Learn more languages. Be more impressive.
It's the worst possible thing she could have heard. The world is giving her more options, right at the moment she realizes she can't even handle the ones she has.
Which brings us to the fig tree metaphor. This is probably the most essential passage for understanding what's happening to her.
It really is. It's this moment of incredible insight that gets right to the heart of the anxiety of overchoice, especially for women at that time who were just starting to be told they could do anything, but were maybe still expected to do everything.
So walk us through it. What is the fig tree?
She pictures her life as this big, beautiful fig tree branching out in front of her, and at the end of every single branch, there's a fat purple fig. Each fig is a different, wonderful future.
And she lists them.
She does. One fig is a husband and happy home. Another is being a famous poet. Another is being a brilliant professor, an amazing editor, a world traveler. Each one is a perfect but mutually exclusive life.
And the problem isn't that she can't have them. It's that she can't choose just one.
Exactly. Because choosing one means all the other figs, all the other possible lives, die. And because she can't decide which one to pick, she just sits there, starving, watching as all the figs wither and turn black and, one by one, plump and fall to the ground.
The desire to have everything leads to having nothing.
It's the paralysis of perfectionism. That fear of commitment, of missing out on the other versions of herself, is what triggers the complete collapse.
And you see that paralysis in her schoolwork, too. She was a brilliant student, but it was selective.
Very selective, almost deceptive. Look at how she avoids her science requirement. She basically talks her class dean into letting her skip the chemistry final.
How did she manage that?
She argued that since she already had a guaranteed A in the class, making her take the exam would be a waste of time. She appealed to this idea of honor among honorable people.
Which is incredibly audacious.
It is, but inside, it eats at her. She knows she spent the time she should have been studying writing sonnets instead. She feels like an awful liar. Her intelligence was becoming a tool for avoidance, not for learning.
And the final straw academically is her honors thesis on James Joyce.
On Finnegan's Wake, of all things. I mean, it's one of the most notoriously difficult experimental novels ever written. The intellectual task is just completely overwhelming.
Her mind just shuts down.
Shut like a clam, is how she puts it. She has to learn German for it, and she can't. And she's trying to grapple with Joyce's language, including that famous 100-letter word.
Babadal grada carnanaren kun bronten an tu for anans gone to hurden and thurnick.
That's the one. She says it looks like Arabic or Chinese, and it sounds like thunder and the fall of man. It's the ultimate intellectual wall. It's meaningless and suffocating. So she decides she has to junk my thesis.
And with it, her entire academic future.
Exactly. The breakdown doesn't start with a boy or a failed romance. It starts with an intellectual failure. The high-achieving Esther the Achiever is the first casualty of the bell jar. Her entire identity was built on her intellect, and it just crumbled.
So with that academic identity gone, her focus shifts really intensely to relationships, to sex, and to this profound fear of what was expected of women in the 1950s.
It's all tied to her relationship with Buddy Willard. He is, on paper, the perfect guy. He's handsome, he's a med student, he's respectable, he's the safe, pre-approved future she's supposed to want.
But that illusion just gets shattered.
Violently shattered when he confesses that he's not a virgin, that he had an affair with a waitress. And the shock for Esther isn't the sex itself, it's that he had been pretending all this time to be so innocent.
It's the hypocrisy.
It's a complete political awakening for her. It exposes the whole gendered double standard. For women like her, purity was the great issue. You lose it and you're ruined. But men like Buddy could live this double life, sleep around, and then still expect to marry a pure, perfect girl.
And this changes her whole worldview.
Completely. She starts dividing the world into two kinds of people. Those who had slept with somebody and people who hadn't. She believes crossing that line will give her access to some secret knowledge that men have.
And the fear tied up in all of this is the fear of marriage and domesticity.
Which is crystallized in that absolutely devastating image of Mrs. Willard's kitchen mat.
It's one of the most powerful images in the whole book. Can you describe what's happening there?
Mrs. Willard, who is the perfect 1950s housewife, is braiding this beautiful, artistic rag rug. It's a labor of love, and she's making it out of her husband's old, worn-out suits.
So it's literally made of his past.
Right. It's this beautiful, sentimental object, but then what does she do with it?
She puts it on the kitchen floor.
The one place where it is guaranteed to be walked on, spilled on, and ground into the dirt for years. And Esther has this terrible epiphany. That's what marriage is. A man secretly wants his wife to flatten out underneath his feet like Mrs. Willard's kitchen mat.
She sees marriage as a form of brainwashing.
brainwashing into a numb, subservient, erased life. And that fuels her decision to take control, to rebel by losing her virginity on her own terms.
Which brings her to Constantine, the simultaneous interpreter.
She chooses him very deliberately. He's smart, he's worldly, and the final irony, he was introduced to her by Mrs. Willard. She shows up at his apartment like it's a scientific experiment, seeing him as an impersonal, priest-like official who will perform this rite of passage for her.
But it's a total failure.
A complete dud. Constantine is just frustratingly asexual. He'd rather listen to balalaika records on his balcony and just comb her hair. The calculated intellectual rebellion fails because her subject won't even participate.
So when that doesn't work, she goes in the complete opposite direction with Marco.
To Marco, the Peruvian financier with the diamond stick pin, who she immediately pegs as a woman hater.
Which is a fascinating and disturbing attraction for her.
It is. She sees woman haters as gods, invulnerable and chock full of power. She's seeking out danger, and the encounter is just brutal. He gets drunk, drags her into the mud, tears her dress, calls her a slut.
And she fights back hard.
With shocking intensity, she smashes her fist into his nose and gives him a terrible nosebleed. And then he does this bizarre, grotesque thing where he smears his own blood on her cheeks and says, "I have earned my diamond with this blood."
It's this perverse staining. Not by sex, but by his violence, which she met with her own.
Exactly. It's a moment where she discovers her own capacity for aggression. And that horrible experience seems to be the final straw of the whole New York trip.
Leading to that symbolic act back at the hotel.
The ritual of detachment. She goes up to her room, and one by one, she throws all of her expensive, now filthy New York clothes out the window into the night. She treats the scraps like a loved one's ashes, burying that failed version of herself.
The New York facade is completely gone now. Esther returns home, and this is where the descent becomes truly clinical, truly frightening.
But before the big psychological collapse, there's a physical one. She goes to visit Buddy in the Adirondacks, and she goes skiing.
And she knows she can't ski well.
She knows. But she's unable to stop the momentum of her life, so she decides to force a stop. She points her skis straight down the mountain, knowing she can't turn, and just plummets, breaking her leg in 2 places.
And there's that strange paradox in that moment of self-destruction.
A huge one. As she's falling, for just a second, she feels this incredible joy. This is what it is to be happy.
Because the pressure is off.
The pressure is off. By breaking her body, she has temporarily broken the engine of her life. She is physically incapable of making decisions or meeting expectations. The pain is a release.
And then soon after, the bell jar itself descends. Can you describe what that sensation is like for her?
It's a feeling of sudden, total, suffocating isolation. A glass dome comes down over her, cutting her off from the world. Everything outside the glass looks distorted and slow, like it's all part of a bad dream. She can see the world, but she can't connect to it.
The paralysis that she felt with the fig tree now applies to everything.
To the simplest daily tasks. Getting out of bed, washing her hair. Why bother? She'd just have to do it all again tomorrow. She wants to do everything once and for all and be through with it. And that's the thinking that leads directly to her suicide attempts.
And those attempts are they're so tragically amateurish.
They're painful to read because they highlight her desperation and her lack of practical knowledge. She tries to hang herself with her mother's silk cord, but she's terrible with knots. And at the last second, her body betrays her and her hands give out.
She tries with a razor blade, too.
She does. She intends to slit her wrists, but she looks at the skin and it seems too defenseless. She can't do it. So instead, she practices on her calf just to see what it feels like.
And then the ocean.
She swims way out, trying to drown herself, but her body is too buoyant. She just keeps popping up like a cork. She feels beaten by her own body's will to live.
Her mother, who clearly doesn't understand what's happening, takes her to see a doctor, Dr. Gordon.
And Esther's reaction to him is immediate fear and deception. She's terrified of being institutionalized, so she gives him a fake name, Ellie Higginbottom from Chicago.
He represents everything wrong with the medical establishment at the time.
Completely. He's patriarchal, judgmental, and he reinforces her mother's idea that this is all just a sickness of the will, a moral failing, and she's terrified of his private shock machine.
Which sets the stage for the big attempt, the one that almost works.
The overdose. She's found by her mother in the cellar, and when she finally wakes up, the physical trauma is immense. One side of her face is purple and swollen, her hair has been shaved off, and when a nurse gives her a mirror, she can't even recognize the bruised, distorted face looking back. She smashes it.
And she's institutionalized. First at a place called Walton,
which is portrayed as a complete nightmare, dehumanizing. The patients look like shop dummies, just empty shells. The whole place is this mix of rigid rules and total chaos.
There's that strange incident with the waiter.
The Negro waiter, who calls her Miss Mucky Muck, and she responds by just deliberately kicking him in the calf. It's this moment of unprovoked aggression that shows how distorted her own perceptions have become.
And then there's Mrs. Mole.
Oh, Mrs. Mole, the woman who grabs the tureen of beans, dumps it all on her plate, and starts making ugly oinking noises as she eats them off the floor. Esther is just horrified and fascinated. This place, which is supposed to be healing her, is just amplifying her sense of the grotesque.
But then things start to shift. She gets moved to Belsize, a private hospital, and this marks the beginning of a real, albeit slow, recovery.
Belsize is presented as the best house. It's a place where patients are actually expected to get better. And critically, this is where she gets a better managed course of electroshock therapy.
The first time was terrifying for her.
It was violent and traumatic. But at Belsize, the treatment is given by Dr. Nolan, who right before gives Esther a warm hug like a mother.
And that small act of kindness changes everything.
It's a totally different philosophy of care. It's about empathy, not just clinical authority. And that hug is what helps Esther start to rebuild trust, which Dr. Gordon had completely destroyed.
And we should mention who's paying for this top-tier care.
Right, Philomena Guinea, the wealthy novelist and alumna from Esther's college. She's the one who provides the money for Esther to be at Belsize.
The same woman whose finger bowl Esther drank from.
The very same. But her charity isn't unconditional, is it? She sends a telegram asking if there was a boy in the case, making it clear that her help might depend on Esther not having been ruined by a man.
Even in the asylum, the pressure for purity is still there.
It never goes away. And at Belsize, Esther meets Joan, who becomes this unsettling mirror image of herself.
Her shadow or her double.
Exactly. Joan arrives at Belsize, and it turns out she knows Buddy Willard. She's read Esther's letters. Her breakdown seems to mirror Esther's own. Joan becomes this living reminder of what I had been and what I had been through.
And Esther eventually has to reject her, very harshly.
It's a crucial step in her recovery. She has to separate her new healing self from her past sickness, and she does that by pushing Joan away, telling her, "I don't like you, you make me puke." It's her way of drawing a boundary.
But the biggest step toward her own autonomy is about her body, and it completely shatters the rules she was raised with.
She decides to get fitted for a diaphragm. And this isn't really about wanting to have sex. It's about wanting sovereignty over her own body.
She even uses Philomena Guinea's money to pay for it.
Yes, she rationalizes that she's buying my freedom. Freedom from the constant fear of an unwanted pregnancy, which she says hung over my head like a big stick to keep me in line.
And her doctor, Dr. Nolan, is completely supportive.
Radically so for the time. When Esther mentions the old Defense of Chastity articles she used to read, Dr. Nolan just dismisses it all as propaganda. That medical validation is incredibly liberating for her.
So the final test of this new freedom is her last sexual encounter in the book.
Which is, again, very calculated. She seeks out Erwin, a math professor. He's smart, he's experienced, and crucially, he's someone she won't have to see again. She's treating it like a transaction.
But it goes horribly wrong physically.
The act itself is painful, and she starts hemorrhaging badly afterward. It's a terrifying scene. He has to drop her off at Joan's apartment, and Joan, completely baffled, ends up taking her to the emergency room.
And her final interaction with Erwin is so telling.
She has to call him to get him to pay the hospital bill. And she ends the call with this resolute click of the receiver. She feels weak-kneed and relieved and realizes his voice meant nothing to her. She handled it. She paid the physical price, but she achieved emotional distance.
But the story ends with this tragic echo, with Joan.
Yes. Joan is later found dead. She hanged herself. Esther goes to her funeral and looks down into the grave, this black 6-foot-deep gap. And she's forced to wonder what exactly she's burying. Is it just Joan? Or is it her past self? Is it the version of her that didn't survive? It's an ending that offers survival, but not necessarily a simple resolution.
So as Esther is standing there about to leave the asylum, the novel leaves us with this one final haunting question that really defines its legacy.
She's survived. She's cured, in theory. But she has no illusions. She asks herself, how did I know that someday at college, in Europe, somewhere, anywhere, the bell jar, with its stifling distortions, wouldn't descend again?
It acknowledges that recovery isn't a finish line.
It's an ongoing process. Mental illness can be a recurring challenge, not a battle you win once and for all.
And that leads her to that final poignant thought about the double bell jar.
She realizes that the girls in the asylum weren't fundamentally different from the girls back at college. She says they all sat under bell jars of a sort.
It's just that the bell jars were different.
Exactly. Whether you were trapped by clinical depression or by the crippling societal expectations of purity and domesticity, either way, you were isolated. Your experience was distorted. The difference was just the type of prison.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. Plath herself said she wrote the bell jar to free myself from the past. She even stated that her second book will show that same world as seen through the eyes of hell.
So, given the incredible, raw, autobiographical intensity of this book and the tragic fact that Plath died just weeks after it was published, what does that tell us about the idea of writing as therapy? Was the artistic freedom she found on the page enough? Or was the past just too real, too powerful, and ultimately impossible to outrun? That question about the power and maybe the limits of art to heal is what makes this book so endlessly haunting.